Good morning, or happy afternoon, or good evening, or whatever time of day you're reading this or watching this. I just want to quickly go over the last part of our notes. We're doing slides 45 through 57, I believe, so it's 12 slides. You're working on the notes packet that starts here, slide 45, and goes down and looks like this. Roughly, we're skipping slide 58 this year because it's a project that I don't think we're going to get to. Okay, so let's look at our notes and get started on that. And there is a 4-minute video that we're going to watch in the middle of all this too. All right, reproductive isolation. So in order for speciation to occur, because we left off last time talking about speciation, you have to have reproductive isolation. And reproductive isolation occurs when some members of that population stop breeding with other members because they just either have, actually there's several reasons why, and we'll talk about the 3 mechanisms in a second. But when they do that, when they stop breeding with each other, that will cause the gene pool to split and you'll have mutations that aren't mixing in with the whole big population. They're just mixing with the ones that can't breed with the other ones. And that will lead to a new species forming. There are 3 main mechanisms of reproductive isolation. The first is geographical. That means something like a mountain range or a river or an ocean comes and separates species in a population. Behavioral is another mechanism that will be one that can cause reproductive isolation. Now, behavioral can be things like mating rituals, that one species, maybe you have 2 separate or mating rituals and one is predominant in one area that then gets reproductively isolated, then that will be the predominant one and that will be another factor. Temporal could be things like nocturnal versus a daytime species. You could also have the seasons, like something mating in the fall versus mating in the spring. Those are 2 temporal meaning time, ways to have reproductive isolation. And we're going to talk more about those in a second. Okay, so actually here's the definitions of those. Geographical is when 2 populations are separated by geographical barriers like mountains or rivers. Behavioral is differences in courtship rituals or other behaviors, mating calls, dances, etc. And then temporal is when 2 or more species reproduce at different times, either seasonally or day versus night. And then this one here shows you had 2 organisms, that was one population, but now there's this river in between and now they've separated by color. It's just one of the variations that they've had. All right, we're going to watch this quick clip. I'm going to turn me off first and we'll scan that. Okay, so I found that to be very interesting. So that's one of the behavioral reproductive isolation mechanisms at work. So the birds of paradise are ones that have developed elaborate ones that are very different from each other, which has resulted in different species basically being formed. So it's kind of interesting. I just like his very crazy dance. All right, here we're going to look at the gray wolf. The scientific name is Canis lupus, and the gray wolf is found in both North America and Eurasia. They have, at one time, they were all one giant species. They roamed the same area because the Bering Strait used to be exposed, and so they could freely cross and migrate. But about 12,000 years ago, that went away, and they are still, though, genetically the same, even though they've been separated by 12,000 years. So, on your papers, what does this tell us about the process of species formation? And I believe it says you've just got a couple lines here. So what does that tell us? Like, is it a fast process? Is it a slow process? What kind of process is speciation, basically? Hopefully you'll take your moment and go ahead and do that. I'm not going to answer that for you though. Here's an example of speciation due to geographical isolation. So you have an ancestral species and eventually there's something that causes them to be separated from each other, maybe a mountain range, who knows. And then you have a slow change. At first they become different races, and then they become a subspecies, and then if enough variation has occurred, you will have 2 different species, okay? And that's in your biozone that you don't have, so that's more for next year when we have our biozones available to us. Patterns of evolution. So there are some basically, divergent evolution is the predominant one that we see and we always think of when we think of evolution. Like right off the bat, you think of how species came and separated from each other, how they had a common ancestor. And we've been working on this a lot with our phylogenetic trees in our mission lab. Our PBS evolution labs, our different missions has focused predominantly on divergent evolution. It hasn't really talked about convergent evolution, which we will get to in a moment. One of the things that you can see is you have these divergences, and each time that a branch separates off, that's where you get a divergence. And it could be something as simple as hair and feathers. So maybe one organism develops feathers, so they branch off and they become a new branch. But it could be a lot more complicated as well. So adaptive radiation is when one common ancestor gives rise to multiple species occupying different niches. So this whole entire thing shows adaptive radiation. So this is where you have one ancestral species, but you can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different species have diverged from it. So it's very similar, but it's taking adaptive radiation is looking at a shorter term change, while divergence looks at longer time spans. So that's how you can keep those two straight, because they do have similar, I mean, they both come from a single ancestor and then they branch out. Phyletic gradualism is when populations diverge slowly by accumulating adaptive features in response to different selective pressures. That can be something as simple as climate change, or we actually saw, or no, we didn't actually see, it could be just environmental. You have, like where Chernobyl occurred, you have lots of mutations occurring very rapidly, and that pressure on that ecosystem is very strong, and so that will have very significant changes in a short amount of time. It doesn't always happen that way. It can be much slower, like we saw on the biozone page. Punctuated equilibrium is where populations are stable but interrupted by brief periods of more rapid change. So they stay the same, and then something occurs and there's a rapid change. And then they've changed, then they stay the same, and then something else happens and they rapidly evolve. So that's just mostly it's an equilibrium, but it's punctuated by brief periods of evolutionary changes. Extinction. Extinction is the death of an entire species. We've heard a lot about extinctions. It is a natural process. However, what we've been hearing, and hopefully you've heard about it, is the significantly increased number of extinctions that are occurring nowadays. We have several mass extinction events that have occurred throughout history. As far as we know, pardon me. First of all, mass extinction is widespread and rapid decreases in life on Earth. Not only loss of species, but entire families, which is made up of both species and the genera, which is a wider umbrella that encompasses more species than just a species line. There are, as far as we know, 5 major mass extinctions where you had 50% of animal species dying off. That's significant. Evidence is mounting to indicate that we are possibly in a 6th mass extinction. And this one I actually have a book on. I took a whole class on it over the summer a couple years ago on the 6th extinction. And it'll be interesting to find out if, we probably won't be alive to find out, but if it is definitely an extinction, a mass extinction or not. So there we go with extinction, the making of a mass extinction. So we have the 5 main mass extinctions here, and then this is the one where you're seeing an uptick in the number of organisms that have gone extinct. And they're saying that this could be, it is not for sure, this is just a theory, the Anthropocene extinction, and this is definitely brought on by human activity. Humans killing for poaching purposes, for overhunting purposes. The whales, for instance, get hunted for, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a complete blank. I know that the whales are getting hunted off of Japan's coast. Dolphins get hunted. A lot of organisms are getting hunted to the point of extinction. And then you add climate change on top of that, where we have oceans warming, which is killing off coral reefs, which is basically eliminating a habitat for unknown number of species. So It'll be interesting to see. It's still within a range of not. I mean, you have these higher rates of extinction at these points, and it was much higher back here. We just don't know. So it'll be interesting to see if we get to that point or not. Was this something that I was supposed to click on? Nope, it was not. Okay, modern humans. How did we evolve? Modern humans are called hominins, which are the human ancestors, and our hominin population rapidly increased and diversified 3.5 million years ago. It included Australopithecus, Paranthropus, and Homo, which is our own genus. Between 3 to 2 million years ago, there were as many as 8 different hominin species in Africa. We now don't have that many, obviously. Here's a cladogram, which you also refer to as a phylogenetic tree. And you can see the chimpanzee broke off and is our most closely related to Homo sapiens. These guys are not, these are all extinct. Neanderthals right here is also closely related to us, but is not around anymore. It is extinct. And here's another cladogram, which could also be called your phylogenetic tree. And it shows how these other organisms, other species evolved off. They diverged from this common ancestor that gave rise to, you could even have the chimpanzee branch way over here. And then you have Homo sapiens way over here. And that's the end of that, I guess. That's all we have on this. We do have an article on Lucy, the oldest, at the time, found skeleton of a human, a modern human. Very small. I think she's like 3 foot tall or something like that, which hopefully we'll get a chance to get to that next week. If not, hopefully the week after. I don't know. We'll see. So we'll see. We don't do much on humans, unfortunately, but human evolution is very fascinating. So hopefully some of the stuff that you've learned we'll be able to put to use for explaining how humans have evolved. That is it for notes for today. This one's a short packet, 16, or short note section, 16 minutes. These notes are not on your quiz on Thursday and Friday, okay? So if you have questions, bring them to class. Please write something down and bring it to class. Maybe I'll give extra credit if you bring a question to class. I don't know. Just please bring questions to class, okay? Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you guys in class. Thank you.